Welcome everybody to today's webinar. We are very excited to be presenting this. My name is Bree Reynolds and I'm the Senior Career Specialist at FlexJobs, and we're very happy to be hosting today's webinar. We are going to be talking about how to avoid career extinction and what you can be doing now to prepare yourself for all the future fun that exists in the career space and kind of, make yourself as ready as possible. So with that in mind, we have a special guest today, Marc Miller, who you may have heard on FlexJobs webinars before. He's been to quite a few of these, and we're very excited to have him back. So Marc is the founder of Career Pivot, CareerPivot.com, a great resource for anyone considering repurposing their career, making a career change, or just figuring out what their next options and ideas are for their future careers. So Marc, thank you so much for being here today. I'm going to pass it over to you, and we will go right ahead and get started.
Thanks, Bree. This is Marc Miller, and let me introduce myself through a whole bunch of slides. That's me. I got brand new headshots there in the beautiful downtown Austin. Was born in New York City. I was raised in New Jersey. I went to college at Northwestern. I then went to work for IBM. And for 22 years, I wandered around a lot. I was a programmer, I was in test, I ran an IT help desk. I then moved off into, sorry about that. I went into training, was in sales. Yes, I crossed to the dark side. I was an IT consultant. I was in marketing. Then, after they screwed me on my pension in '99, I went off and went to work for a startup, Agira Inc., which I wish I had their logo. We don't have the logo anymore, which we were then bought out by Lucent, and then Lucent spun us out as Agira Systems. I commonly say I had a moment of clarity. On July 11th of 2002, I was riding my bicycle down a hill at about 25 miles an hour, went into a blind turn, and unfortunately, there was a Toyota Corolla going the other direction. You may be able to see. My bike got bent in a few places. I tore up a knee. I broke a hip. I dislocated a shoulder, broke a bunch of ribs. I had imprints of the pads of the helmet in my head, but I had no internal injuries and no brain injuries I'm willing to admit to. And oh, by the way, they had me walking on crutches in 3 days. I was back on a bike in 10 weeks, flying back to China in 4 months. Oh, by the way, I flew right smack into the middle of the SARS epidemic in Guangdong province. It says what the hell am I doing moment. I then went off and got my teacher certification at the local community college. I taught high school math for 2 years, Algebra 1, Algebra 2. I then discovered Launchpad Job Club, which is where much of what I do today came from. I then did a 1-year stint in nonprofit at the Jewish Community Center. As I always say, as a non-Jew, being the face of a Jewish organization is interesting. I relapsed and went back into a startup where I built training and certification programs. I left there in 2011 and 2012. I launched Career Pivot. So that's who I am. We're going to have a set of polls to tell me who you are. So, Bree, do you want to throw up the first poll?
Yes, let's go ahead and do that. So I'm going to launch this poll. On your screen, you should find a poll that you're able to click on. So please feel free to click on whichever number of years of work experience apply to you. Looks like we've got the clicks coming in fast and furious. With about half of people voting, the majority are between 20 and 30 years old, about 43% of our audience today. And then we've got not 20 and 30 years old, between 20 and 30 years of career experience. I was thinking, gee, that's very unusual for our audience. 20, 30 years of career experience does seem to be the biggest one. So we've got most people voting. So in order, we have between 20 and 30 years of experience at number 1 for the largest group, 43%. And then at 26%, more than 30 years, but very close to that at 25%, between 10 and 20 years. And then 6% less than 10 years.
Okay.
Thanks everybody for participating.
Let's move on to the next poll.
All right, and that's current work status?
Yep.
All right, let's launch this one. If you guys would mind clicking on the screen and telling us where you are in your career right now. Employed, unemployed, retired, re-entering the workforce, all of those sorts of fun things.
This is the one that always surprises me.
This one, ooh, we've got a pretty big group here. Okay, so the vast majority of votes are in, and we have about 44% say they are unemployed right now. The next step is 23% say they're employed but looking to change jobs, and then 19% employed but looking to change careers, 12% re-entering the workforce, and 3% retired.
Okay, actually, it's interesting because that's usually lower than usual for re-entering the workforce. That's usually always the one that surprises me. So let's go on to the next one. I'm real interested to see these next three questions.
All right. Have you attended an industry conference? Here, we've got it up on the screen, in the last 12 months? All right, these answers are coming in quickly. Let's see, vast majority of folks are in, and 65% say no, they have not, and 37, well, let's see, we're going back and forth. 63% say no, 37% say yes.
Okay, let's move on to the next one.
All right, two more. You guys are doing great. Thanks for sticking with us. All right, this one is, have you taken any online training in the last 12 months? Wow, this one's got clear differences here. We have, with most people reporting, we have 84% yes and 16% no. So that's a
yes. I like to hear that. And the last one.
And the very last one, how often do you listen to podcasts? If I were answering, I would say, is there a time I'm not listening to podcasts? Because I've become quite the podcast junkie.
Actually, I had a never on there, but
yeah, I changed it to what's a podcast. If you're a never person, you can also click on that one. That was just me being cheeky. All right, so with most people reporting, let's close this one out and share it with the audience. About 41% infrequently, then weekly 23, daily 20, monthly 14, and what's a podcast or never at 3.
Cool. That's where I wanted to have a good feel for who's out there, because one of the things I'm going to stop fairly frequently for questions. So as soon as you come up with a question, enter it into the chat box, and the lovely Bree will be monitoring that box. So this is all about creative destruction. And believe it or not, there's a really good podcast out there, Freakonomics Radio. And about, 3 months ago, they did a whole one on creative destruction. And this is all about the process of industrial mutation that incessantly revolutionizes the economic structure from within and incessantly destroys the old one and incessantly creates the new one. By the way, creative destruction is nothing new. Back in 1905, if you wanted music in your home, you learned to play the piano. So there were about 400,000 pianos were sold back in 1905. Steinway had a really, really good business. Well, the phonograph, which would displace it, was actually created in 1877. So notice there's a 30-year difference there. And later, we would have radio. So from 1905 to 1919, phonographs grew dramatically. And so the revenue for phonographs in 1919 was triple that of pianos. By 1933, 2/3 of all households had radios. So today, we buy about 30,000 pianos a year, down from 400,000. And by the way, Steinway stopped making pianos during World War II. They made gliders during World War II. When they came out of World War II, all the lumber they had that they traditionally made pianos out of had all gone bad. So they got in the casket business. But as the piano industry was pretty much destroyed, what came out of this was the music industry. I can tell a lot of you probably still remember vinyl records, but we have had a renaissance of music. We would not have the music industry had we not gotten the phonograph and literally wiped out the piano. So as one industry was destroyed, we had a whole new industry pop up. Now, this is the interesting one that most of us can remember. Everybody remember Kodak? Now, by the way, Kodak did not make money on cameras. Kodak made money on film and film developing. And you probably will recognize all those different kinds of film. By the way, the reason why they kept on producing new formats of film, because every time they introduced a new format, interest in photography just exploded. In fact, the last one that you see on the bottom, the Advantix, was created to try and stave off digital photography. Well, actually, Kodak actually invented the digital camera in 1975. By the way, by 2001, remember that, 25 years later, Kodak was #2 in the digital camera market. The problem was they were losing $60 on every sale. They went bankrupt in 2012. There were Kodak at its peak employed over 200,000 people. The rest of the film industry employed hundreds of thousands of people. The whole film industry was destroyed. But what came out of that? This whole digital image revolution. So we wouldn't have people like Adobe. My favorite that has revolutionized many aspiring artists or graphic artists is Canva. If you haven't used canva.com, that's canva.com, by the way, it's free. And it's a mini Adobe Photoshop. All the graphics on my website, I use Canva. Now, they have a freemium version on it, but I have a lot of folks simply use the free version. If you buy their stock photos, the stock photos are real expensive. They're $1. It's revolutionized things. Now, anybody received a Jackie Lawson video card? I get them all the time. These are all where people send you a card. They have beautiful graphics. They're all done. They used to be done in Flash. They're all done in HTML5 now. They're gorgeous. A real world example is my buddy Steve Coyle. Steve he's a tester for health insurance gateway companies. I'm not sure what the heck he does, but he travels the country frequently taking nature photography. By the way, he has his own website, stevecoylephotography.com, and you can get on there. And by the way, you can buy wall calendars, which I have done from him. He has all kinds of other stuff you can buy. In other words, if you're a really good photographer, you actually can make money. Now, are you going to replace your full-time income? Probably not. But this is, if you were looking to build a portfolio career, which if you listen to my podcast this week, I have Steve Preston, who has a latest book out on portfolio careers. This is a great way of doing it. This is all feasible because of digital photography. Now, so what we've seen so far, it took approximately 30 years for digital photography to really take off and really start destroying the industry. And then it grew remarkably. Now, Let's look at Amazon. Amazon was created in 1993. It sold books. Well, 2011 Borders Books went out of business. So we're talking now about 18 years. What we're seeing is things are speeding up. By the way, Amazon Prime was launched in 2005. And that is a Vitamix blender container. I make smoothies every morning. And 2 months ago, on a Saturday evening, I dropped my Vitamix blender container and it broke. I got up Sunday morning. I couldn't make my smoothie. I then got on Amazon. I ordered it on Amazon. And by the way, it was at my doorstep at 6 p.m. Sunday. So Amazon is just not books anymore. So we're seeing Amazon have tremendous impacts on all the major retailers. There was an article I found that was talking about the 10 retail stores that were most likely to go out of business this year. And Joseph A. Banks is actually owned by a company that also owns Men's Warehouse. And their prediction was they're going to go out of business this year. Wait a minute. How am I going to order clothes? Well, the answer is there are lots of ways I can order clothes online. Now, what's being created out of this? There is something called Fulfillment by Amazon. If you're not sure, go Google it. Fulfillment by Amazon says, by the way, you can sell your own products on Amazon. You ship the products to Amazon. They will warehouse them and they will sell them for you on Amazon.com. And you're probably going, huh? Why would I want to do that? Well, let me give you two examples. This is actually a friend of mine. He has a brand called Fitcora. He bought a design of a workout glove that he really likes. By the way, he got on Alibaba, found 10 manufacturers in China who would manufacture it for him. He selected the vendor, he selected one of the factories, and they now manufacture it, ship it to Amazon, Fulfillment by Amazon, and he sells it online. By the way, he makes about $2,000 a month doing this. Now he's looking at buying other designs, again, putting his brand name on it and selling it that way. Now, let me give you another one. If you go to this website, onlinesellingexperiment.com, they actually, you'll see later, they were a guest on Pat Flynn's show. They will show you how you can walk into a Target, a Walmart, a Home Depot, a Lowe's, walk down the clearance aisle, and Amazon has an app where you can scan the barcodes and you can see what does that item sell for on Amazon. So therefore, if you can get it at 60% off, and yes, Amazon takes about a 25% cut for warehousing and selling. If you can get it off enough, you ship it to Amazon and then you go sell it. They actually teach you how to do that. Actually, I've got one former client who is looking into doing this. I mean, this is all new. By the way, this is all new in the last 2 years. This is how fast things are moving as opportunities keep on popping up. Now we have the fun one, the iPhone. The iPhone was introduced in 2007. So, anybody remember digital cameras? Remember, we were just talking about digital cameras. Who owns a digital camera anymore? Okay, remember paper maps? We used to have a Mapco store in Austin. We used to have multiple of them. They were cool to go into. I really enjoyed going into those stores. Well, I don't know where they are now. I'm sorry, I don't even get on TV anymore to get my ESPN scores. I get it off my phone. Oh, by the way, yes, I have a tile on my keys. I have in various different places. In fact, I put them in my wife's bag. So if we can't find them, we get on the tile app, and it will tell you where it is. And it won't tell you where it is, but it'll start beeping it. And this is a real cool app. I really like this. Oh, by the way, I happen to have State Farm. You know, if I get stopped by the cops, which hasn't happened in a long time, I can bring up my insurance card. I don't even need to print out or to mail me an insurance card anymore. I can just show it on my phone. Oh, by the way, if I have an accident on that same app, I can take a picture and submit my claim. Then there's Sling TV. Yes, I've cut the cord. I pay $20 a month to Sling TV. And on that, I get HGTV, which means I can watch International House Hunters. I can watch that directly on my phone or my iPad. And lastly, as many of us can relate to, yes, I answer all those questions my wife asks me that I simply talk into Google and it tells me the answer. This is all in the last 10 years. But what's, of course, now, who has a landline? Oh, by the way, I also use it to have video communications. I'm wondering how many of you actually have Skype or FaceTime conversations with your kids. And yes, we all do text now. And I'll make a wager most of you at least text your kids. These are all changes that have occurred in the last 10 years. So, but what's been created? Number one, the sharing economy. Uber, Lyft wouldn't exist, Airbnb, almost everything related. By the way, self-driving cars are going to be largely driven by the processor in your phone. Think about that. So we are seeing a revolution on what the phone is capable of doing. Now, back in the 1980s, I ran a big IBM mainframe. And my iPhone 6S phone has more power than that mainframe did. Certainly has a whole lot more memory. The other piece, the Internet of Things. And this is both exploding both on the personal level, i.e. you being able to, anybody who's seen the Ring doorbell, now the Ring floodlights and cameras, all of this is based on the Internet of Things, similar to the Tile app. This is creating opportunities that are just mind-boggling, particularly, by the way, in the industrial space, or what is called IIoT, or Industrial Internet of Things. Then, if you want to learn to be an app developer, it's never been easier, and there's tons and tons of opportunity. And the last thing is, oh, by the way, there's a site called acx.com. It's owned by Amazon. By the way, I've published my first audiobook out there. I'm about to publish my second one. You can go out there. I do my own voices. I record it myself. But, I can go find voice talents. ACX has a dating service such that you can find voice talent if you don't like your voice and you want someone else to record it. And then they have a variety of different ways. You can pay the voice artist. You can do revenue sharing. There are any number of ways. And the audio books will be available on audible.com, amazon.com, and iTunes. Now, by the way, I'm doing this webinar and I record my audio using a $60 microphone that's plugged into my MacBook Pro. I happen to have a $10 screen filter, a pop filter, and I have about a $15 little arm that holds up and balances the microphone. In other words, I can produce audiobooks with equipment either I already have or I might have to spend $80, $90 on. I mean, it's nothing. So this has created a world of new industries. So you're one of two things. Either you are scared out of your wits, or you're going, wow, this is cool. So which is it? So do we have any questions piled in or typed in?
Let's see. Oh, yes. And as I forgot to mention at the top of the hour, if you do have questions, I know Marc mentioned this briefly, feel free to put them in the GoToWebinar control panel. If you don't see your control panel, there might be a little orange arrow floating somewhere in the corner of your screen all by itself. If you click that orange arrow, the control panel should appear and you'll be able to see the questions area. So if you have any questions for Marc at this point, feel free to put them in. But I also know that some people have actually asked for if you would cover any recommended news sources or podcasts to keep us current with trends as those of us who would like to re-enter the workforce, which I know is coming up in your presentation. So yes,
yep.
That will be covered.
Yep.
And it looks like no questions at this point, just eagerly awaiting the next part of your presentation.
Okay, cool. Just checking my time here. So the first thing I'm going to tell you to do, so how do you stay on top of this? Well, there are three things I'm going to tell you that you need to do. Now, the first thing I want to tell you is your employer is no longer going to do anything for you to stay up to date. Those days are gone. You're going to have to spend your time, your money on staying up to date, and more importantly, getting ahead of the curve. In other words, staying ahead of where things are moving. It used to be like we could see with, a good example with the digital photography, that took a long time. Things now, like we've seen in the last 10 years, things have rapidly moved forward. So the first thing I'm going to tell you to do is go to an industry conference, at least one a year on your nickel. Now, hopefully there's one in your town or one close by, but I would plan on, and I'm going to talk to you what I've done the last 3 years. The second, yes, if you are not listening to podcasts, you are missing a huge opportunity. I am addicted to podcasts now. And I listen to a whole slew of them. I have about a dozen that I listen to, and I'm always looking for more. And the third thing is online training has never been more pervasive and less expensive. The whole point here is you need to get on and really focus on where things are moving so that you can stay up to date. So from an industry conference, I've attended one each year. And by the way, you're going to see three very different conferences. Firstly, I went to the NCDA, National Career Development Association conference, where I was up there with Bree. We met face to face. And if nothing else, Bree and I got to know each other a lot better. And so therefore I partner with FlexJobs. And so a lot of times you need to go to these things for relationships as much as things to learn. I purposely went to a pre-session on this, which Richard Leitner had. And Richard Leitner wrote oh God, my mind's gone blank. Unpacking Your Bags. And much to my surprise, Richard actually knew who I was, which, by the way, made me feel real good because he's a legend in this industry. Last year, I went to the Berkman conference. I am a Berkman consultant. I use the Berkman assessment. They are rolling out new products. They're making major changes. And by the way, it was in New Orleans. So what I did was we turned it into a vacation. I live in Austin, Texas. We went to Galveston for a weekend. We then drove to New Orleans. Then we went to Destin, Florida after the conference, and we drove home. Yes, I took the whole thing as a tax write-off. And yes, you can write most of this off, even if you don't have a business. And it's all about job search. You can write it off. And yes, you need to, you can wrap all kinds of things around it. This year, later this month, I'm going to Anaheim, California. I'm going to the podcast movement. This is a podcasting conference that the biggest names in podcasting will be there, but I'm also on a podcast a week. I have a booker who books me on podcasts every week. And there are any number of folks who I've been on the podcast, but I've never met them face to face. I am really looking forward to meeting them and actually going forward and developing relationships. So a lot of times these industry conferences, it's, yes, you can learn something, but it's who you can meet and who you can further relationships with. So, questions? Has anyone entered one in yet? I'm going to talk about podcasts here in a second.
Yes, we do have a couple of questions coming in. Okay, so the first one is, how do you manage to make a living with starting something new, and how do you find mentors? So kind of a twofer in that question.
Okay. Firstly, it's a lot of this, if you ever read the book, it's Taylor Pearson's, I'm suffering from CRS, can't remember stuff. It's all about, I'll think of it in a second. It is, the book is called End of Jobs. He refers to stair-stepping out, and that is doing something on the side. When you are going to do something on the side, yes, it's going to take a while. And you may very well see people who, you think they're overnight success and they've been at it for 10 years. My business Career Pivot is finally taking off. I've been at it for 5 years. I am on, and I'll talk about this in a little while, I am with a flipped lifestyle community, which is 2 Kentucky school teachers who are now teaching people how to build membership sites. They are in the process of selling their elementary librarian website for over $1 million. By the way, it's taken 5 years. So I'm going to talk a little bit about podcasts in a second, about how you find mentors.
All right, so perfect. Yes, and I would also say for anybody who hasn't listened to Marc's podcast, I just listened to that one about portfolio careers this morning. It's a great podcast. So if you're wondering where to start in the podcast listening world, Marc's is a pretty good podcast to start with. Okay, so the next question is, does additional training, college degrees, or certifications help you and awesome jobs? Okay.
The key piece here is you need to find people who look, taste, and smell like you and ask them, did it do them any good? I am finding at our age, and by the way, I'm 61, going back for a college degree is not worth the money. Going back for the certification, maybe a certificate program. So one of the things I always claim is get on LinkedIn, plug in the alphabet soup, like if you're a project manager, plug in PMP in the last name field, then find all those people in your area that have a PMP certification, and then reach out and touch them and say, by the way, has it been helpful? I'll use a good example. My son, when he graduated from University of Dayton in 2006, he spent 2006 and 2007 getting his APIC certification, which is supply chain. And when he was applying for a job in Sacramento, he got on the APIC's website and he contacted all the officers, and he used the magic word I told him to use is, can I have 15 minutes of your time to ask some advice? And one of the things he asked him was it worthwhile him getting the CPIM certification? Had it done them any good? And what they all came back and said, every last one of them said, yes, they had survived the dot-com bust because having that certification. In other words, they were not laid off because they had the CPIM certification. So certifications are very, very localized. They're very regional. Their value is very regional. And you got to talk to the people in your area and say, by the way, is it worth it? And that's similar for some of the training I'm going to talk about here in a second. So any other questions?
Let's see. Yes, it looks like there's one more. Let's see. This is from Grant. I used to work as a YouTube channel manager, but after losing my job, I've had no luck finding any freelance work doing online video. What would you suggest?
Are you, my first question would be, are you looking local or are you looking national? And are you looking at, are you looking to produce videos or manage them? I guess a lot of it depends. A lot of this is, in fact, I've got a guy I'm doing a feedback session, I'm doing a Berkman with right now, who works for a major broadcaster, and he's in IT. And I've told him, I said, he wants to be a creative. I said, go get go build a website of your own. He has bought one of those 3D cameras. I said, start producing videos. And in other words, demonstrate to me that you know your stuff. So a lot of this is marketing, and not, and if you're looking at I'd have to, if you want to reach out to me afterwards, I'll be happy to talk with you, and you'll get my contact information at the end.
Perfect. That sounds good.
Okay.
All right. So let's move on. I know there's some other questions just coming in, but let's move on with the presentation, and then we can get to those in the next Q&A.
Okay. So podcasts. I know I've had people saying, oh, there is no podcast in my niche. No one has anything in my niche because I'm so specialized. Well, if there's a chameleon breeder podcast, there's a podcast for everybody. And by the way, this guy gets 10,000 downloads every month. I found this guy because I listened to the School of Podcasting with Dave Jackson, and he had this guy on because he's saying, "Wow, this is a niche podcast." Now, let me tell you the podcasts that I listen to. So first thing, you can get podcasts and typically in one of three sources. One, iTunes. This is the podcast. If you have an iPhone, you're going to have that little podcast icon on your phone. The second is Google Play, and the third is Stitcher. Now, these are the three places that you will find my podcast. iTunes, which is the podcast app. But by the way, they're all hosted. I happen to have my podcast hosted on Libsyn. So, as Bree said, come listen to my podcast. I just crossed 1,500 downloads for the month of July, which I'm rather happy with. And as I said, this week's episode is on with Steve Preston, a really good guy out of the UK. So yes, he speaks funny. And he has a brand new book on portfolio careers. I just recorded next week's episode, and it's the story of me going into teaching high school math, which I did back in 2004, and why it didn't work out. Although I was highly successful, I couldn't do it. And I explain why. Now, I listen to two financial podcasts. The first one is my buddy, Roger Whitney. He is the Retirement Answer Man. I love Roger because he does not talk about traditional retirement. He talks about life maximization. I'll let you, and Roger was on my podcast about 2-3 months ago. Similarly, on Saturday mornings, I have a ritual. I listen to Money Matters, Hanson McLean. Hanson and McLean have been doing a radio show out of Sacramento for, close to 25 years. And they upload it every Saturday morning. And I love these guys. Now, if you're a marketing person, I listen to Marketing Smarts. This is put out by Marketing Profs, marketingprofs.com. It's rather interesting. The Carrie O'Shea Gorgon, who is the host of the show, I know from a Twitter chat that I've been attending every Sunday night called Blog Chat. And I've been attending that Twitter chat probably for 4 or 5 years. And if you want to understand social and digital marketing, I love this podcast. Now, I also, from a social media perspective, I am a Buffer user, and they have a great podcast on the science of social media. Their episode this week was on hashtags and where to use them and where not to use them, and more importantly, the rules around hashtags. By the way, I am not a big fan of hashtags, and it's one thing I haven't quite figured out, but I love these guys because their podcasts are typically pretty short. They're very digestible, 10 to 20 minutes. And by the way, I listen to podcasts on my morning walks when I'm at the YMCA. I'm on my elliptical trainer. I don't even listen to the radio anymore in my car. I have Bluetooth in the car. I listen to my podcasts and my audiobooks. Now, another one that I just adore is Darren Rouse, ProBlogger. If you want to understand how to create a blog that's going to make you money, his podcast is the one to listen to. He's got about 200 episodes now. He started out about 1.5 years ago with 31 episodes in 31 days, and it was 31 days to a better blog. Now, you also have to understand, Darren is Aussie, so he's fun to listen to. He talks funny. He's a blast. And by the way, he's incredibly honest about things like, he did a whole episode about 3 or 4 months ago on imposter syndrome. Now, Darren makes most of his money on a website called Digital Photography School, which he started 12, 13 years ago. And he talks about how he makes money. He talks about the different revenue sources. He doesn't give you actual dollar amounts, but he gives you the breakdown and how he does it. Now, if you want to be an entrepreneur, if you're looking for mentors, you're looking for people, you need to listen to Pat Flynn. This is the Smart Passive Income. Now, Pat in 2007 was an architect. He got laid off. He started a website that taught people how to pass the architectural exam. He also has a website having to do with, I believe, job listings related to security guards. That's completely passive and it just runs. Pat, so the online selling I talked about earlier with Amazon, they were on, he had guests on who, these two guys who started a business, and that's what they do. They use procurement by Amazon. They make money buying stuff and selling it on Amazon. They also, they've got 2 small warehouses, 1,000 square foot warehouse in Dallas, and they ship stuff in. They ship it to Amazon, and they make a living off of it. But smart passive income. Pat, what I love about Pat is he's incredibly giving. He's rarely, yes, he sells stuff on his both his website and his on his podcast, but he gives you 10 times more than what you than he spends 10 times more giving than he does selling. So if you find any of these podcasts, what you can do in iTunes, it will talk about related podcasts. Go follow those breadcrumbs, or just get in there and search on iTunes or Stitcher or Google Play and start searching on the keywords on things that you need to listen to. By the way, I have found a lot of other podcasts by listening, like, for example, Dave Jackson, the School of Podcasting. I listen to his every week. It comes out every Monday. And he's the one who had the chameleon breeder. I haven't listened to that one, but as I listen to different podcasts, other podcasters come on these shows and I find new podcasts to go listen to. So to some extent, this is kind of following the breadcrumbs and also finding the ones that you want to listen to. So do we have any questions that have come in, Bree?
Indeed, we do. Lots of good ones. Okay. So actually, just a quick recap. One person's asking for the 3 big things to do: attend industry conferences, the podcast, and what's the final one?
It's online training. And I will recap that.
Awesome. All right. And then, are podcasts helpful for visual people?
The answer is yes and no. If you're really visual, you're going to find podcasts. You're going to have to find ones that work for you. What I find is, like, for example, my podcast, I try to keep it around 20 minutes, 20 to 25 minutes. The reason why is that's my drive time. I don't drive any more than 20 minutes anymore. So I'm always looking for things in digestible chunks. Now, by the way, I listen to Paychecks and Balances, which is a millennial finance podcast. Why do I listen to that? Because I do a multi-generational workshop. And by the way, I was a guest on their show. But their show tends to be an hour to an hour and 10 minutes. And I find that difficult. So you're going to have to find the ones that you can digest. It's one reason why I like the Buffer, the Science of Social Media. Their stuff tends to be short and digestible. And yes, I have a short attention span. So next question.
All right. And I will also add to that, there are some video podcasts. So I think there's more audio podcasts than video, but there are some video ones out there. So search for those too. You might find a couple good ones. Okay, so let's see. How do you choose which industries to go to conferences for? Is it industries that you want to target for future employment or something else?
If you are looking at getting into a new industry, then I would be targeting industries that you want to get into. When I talk about repurposing your career, it is either using your current skill set in a new industry or using your current skill set in a new industry or using your current industry and moving to a new skill set. The challenge is switching industries tends to be really hard. So I'll use the example. I've dealt with both product managers, project managers, business analysts, where they have their business acumen and then they have their industry skills. And when they want to switch industries, they'll say, oh, you don't have any industry skill. And they'll hire someone with industry skill without the business acumen. By the way, I've seen that with a couple companies here in Austin, and it's always disastrous. So one of the things you have to do as you move into a new industry is build up street cred in that industry and going to industry conferences and actually meeting people. And yes, if you are an introvert, this is going to be really uncomfortable, is going and doing that. Hopefully I answered that question. I
think so. And then let's see. How do you establish credibility when starting a new business?
So when this is a classic example. When I started Career Pivot, I started blogging. And I actually started writing 4 times a week. Now, I've deleted most of my blog posts from 2011 because they're not very good. But the idea was to continue to produce material that was credible. It showed that I had the expertise. Now, I have a blog post on my website talking about switching industries, and it's Daniel. I can't pronounce Daniel's last name. Daniel wanted to get into the smart grid industry. He was a product manager. And what he did was he started interviewing people in the smart grid industry once a month. And then he would write about it. After 18 months, he had street cred. People were willing to talk to him in the smart grid industry. By the way, I wish I'd given him that strategy. It's a brilliant strategy. So, Bree, do
All
we
right.
do we have any more, or do you want to move on?
Let's see, just one more quick one here. Could we get
Sure.
the name of the podcaster who talked about portfolio careers? So this was the
Sure.
guy you had on
Well,
this week.
you want to go to Repurpose Your Career. Go search on that on iTunes or Stitcher or Google Play, and you'll find it. And his name is Steve Preston. He's Steve Preston. Steve Preston, CareerCatalyst.com.
Awesome. All right, we have a couple other questions, but we can save those for the last Q&A session.
Okay.
So let's get moving.
Okay. So, online training. It has never been easier to get training at affordable costs. So first, you probably heard of MOOCs, massively open online courses. These are largely universities. Now, MOOC.org is actually just a subdomain of edx.org. EDX is all that four-letter F word, free. Remember that. Now, as you can see from the bottom, it's MIT, it's Harvard, it's Berkeley, the University of Texas, which is just across the river from me. And the whole idea here is they have put their courses out there for free. Now, they vary in quality, but there's a ton of stuff out there. And it's all over the place as far as what you can learn, both technical, non-technical, soft skills, hard skills. Then we move off to technical training. And the first one is, I've actually talked with these guys and I kind of like what they're doing, is Udacity. They do nano degrees. These are very, very highly focused online, training tracks that you actually get a little certificate at the end. If you want to be an iPhone developer, you want to be a full stack developer, and they offer it in two tracks. One, you can do it with a cohort, or you can do it on your own. If you do it with a cohort, it's, I think they're typically around $1,000. If you don't, they're about $500. Pretty affordable. The next is General Assembly. Now, you probably have heard about General Assembly. General Assembly has just exploded. They have coding boot camps all over the country. I actually had a client go through their UX design or user experience design boot camp, and their boot camps are not cheap. They're $13,000, $14,000, $15,000. But they also have an online component that are much more affordable. Again, these are mostly technical stuff. Then there's Skillshare or Skill Crush. I have to move my little, oops. Yeah, Skill Crush. Keeps on doing that to me. Okay. And Skill Crush is one that FlexJobs partners with. And they do something similar to General Assembly and Udacity. There are all kinds of paid training that are more than just technical. The big one is if you have a premium package on LinkedIn, you are given full access to lynda.com. And my experience with Lynda has actually been pretty good. They're the folks they develop, who develop the courses, they're very well done. I'm a former instructional designer. They're very well designed. I recently here took a course on digital remarketing, i.e., how to do retargeting ads and how to tag. When you come to my website, yes, you're getting tagged, and I later then can target an ad to you. Yes, if you find you suddenly go to a website and you go to some other website and suddenly that ad starts showing up. That's what's happening. It's being retargeted. So they've got both soft skill. They've got some decent interviewing courses out there. It's a lot of good stuff. And
Mark, if I can interject
Sure.
on Lynda, they also happen to have a pretty good course on how to find a remote job and recovering from a layoff, which FlexJobs actually did both of those. I did recovering from a layoff, and then my colleague Mike Gutman did how to find a remote job. So a couple other Lynda offerings, and they really are a really high quality course generator. They do some good stuff.
Yeah, I mean,
throw those out there.
Yeah, well, Linda doesn't. One of the things that I like about Linda, and LinkedIn bought them, is they don't develop the courses largely. They get other experts to develop the courses, and it's bundled in with your LinkedIn Premium membership. Now, one of my favorites is Coursera, Coursera.org. Coursera is tied to the MOOC courses. They are largely university based, but some of them are big company based. Yes, you have to pay for them, but they're pretty affordable. I'll be writing about Stan in the coming weeks. I've got a guy, 67 years old, who has remade himself into a big data guy. And by the way, he just got hired after we've been looking for almost a year. And he almost everything he studied, he learned on Coursera. And Stan didn't have a lot of money. So he was very, very picky and choosy on choosing on which courses he did and how much money he spent. But Coursera is very, very affordable. There's Skillshare, which it's similar to Linda, has all kinds of different kinds of courses. And the last one, the interesting one, is either Udemy or Udemy. Everybody has a different way of pronouncing it. Udemy is kind of a bazaar for selling courses. Most of them are very inexpensive. Some of them are really good, and some of them really stink. But a lot of the course vendors, the course developers out there, will end up giving you some free courses. And I've taken some free ones, and that's the way you can test out to see whether you want to spend the $19 or $29 for one of their courses. So you're not talking here spending tens of thousands of dollars. You're looking at spending anywhere from $20, $30 to maybe $1,000. This is not about going back and getting, getting a master's degree. Now, what a lot of people do is in their education section on their LinkedIn profile, they will put their Coursera courses. Some of these courses will give you a certificate you got to pay a little extra for, but that's something you can make a decision. But I've got any number of clients who've taken Coursera courses, and they just, as soon as they're completed, they pass them, they go put them on their LinkedIn profile. So we're almost done here. Any questions?
Yes, we have a bunch of questions coming in, and I'm wondering, I know we're at the top of the hour. Mark, do you have maybe an extra 10 minutes to hang on?
I'm fine.
All right, awesome. So for everybody who's asked questions, we'll try to get to as many of those as we can. And this is also being recorded. So if you do have something else that you need to get to, we'll be sending you a link to the recording tomorrow afternoon. So you'll be able to review the whole webinar and also get these answers that you may not be able to hang out for in these last 10 minutes. All right, cool.
You'll go to the end of the webinar to get all my contact information.
Yep, exactly. Just fast forward. Not that you should skip around all the good stuff we already put out there, but yeah, fast forward to the end. You'll get Mark's info. Okay. So one of the questions is, do you have any opinion on what's better, to keep a low-skilled job to say that you have a job, so when you're applying, you don't have that kind of gap that people worry about in their resume, versus going out without a cover job, so to speak, when you're changing careers?
Okay. Usually the worst time to change careers is when you're unemployed. A lot of it depends on, a lot of this is mindset. And so, I have any number of, I'll use an example. I've got a half-time client I've got right now who teaches at a major university. He's a lecturer. And what I've told him to do is keep on teaching. And two is to go find a problem to solve. Don't find a job, find a problem to solve, and that will lead you somewhere. By the way, he's a class example. I'm running into all these lecturers. What he tells me is he teaches for free and he gets paid to grade papers. Well, by the way, he doesn't get to teach face-to-face anymore. It's all online. And that's where he gets all his enjoyment. So he's going, why do I want to do this anymore? And that's a classic example of creative destruction. And I've got him going looking at problems. So a lot of it depends on how much you need the money coming in, and it's a mindset issue. A lot of times when we are unemployed, you know what? Our self-esteem drops, and that has dramatic effects. Now I'm launching a online community that I'm going to launch in September, and I've got my initial 14 members in my initial cohort. And one of the guys is a teacher, and he's trying to figure out, does he take a teaching job? Because he wants to build an online website. He wants to build an online enterprise. Well, does he take the teaching job? Does he take a bunch of part-time jobs? Because he wants to spend the time doing that. So the answer is maybe. Hopefully that was a vague answer, because there is no right answer.
No, I think it helps to see kind of both sides and how you work through even thinking about something like that. So good. Okay. So the next question is, let's see. Is loading a portfolio on websites like Upwork useful, or is it better to build and create and invest in a personal brand website or a personal website and load your work up that way?
I would do both. Now, I'm not an Upworks expert. What I've been told to do is Upworks is kind of like, when I get on Airbnb, I'm only going to go look at Airbnb locations that have lots of reviews. So one of the challenges is with Upworks, I've been told, is to make sure that you do some projects, and you may have to do them for free or very low cost for people who will then give you a really good review, and kind of start stacking your reviews. So the answer is I would do both. It's similar to, am I going to offer my courses? I offer them on my website, but I might put them on Udemy as a lead magnet to drive them back to my website. So the answer is both.
As is so often the case. So these things. Yep. All right. Next question. Let's see. Oh, how do you find out what your niche is? So this person says, I was just laid off from an online company as it's more profitable to sell digital instead of live. How do you find out what your niche is?
There's lots of, one of the ways to do that is get on Google keywords tool and start searching on there and find out, number one, what are the things that are driving traffic? And two, what do you want to do? It's interesting. Here recently, I was talking to a gentleman who had been laid off at a major pharmaceutical company, and he was an IT guy. And we got talking, and he had been building websites for the last 10 years that are search engine optimized, and he then drives traffic. They're on all these different very long tail keyword, and they drive traffic at Amazon and other places where he gets affiliate income. He's built that up to, it makes about $30,000 a year. He paid off his mortgage 10 years early. Now, can he keep making money at that? Yeah, it's never going to be full time. It's never going to be a full-time living. And he's going, Mark, you could do that same thing. And my response is, yes, I could. I don't want to. I have no interest in building keyword optimized websites. I just have no interest. Can I do it? Yes. Do I want to do it? No. So it's both, what is the niche? Do your research, and then what do you want to do? And no one can answer that for you other than you.
Yes, absolutely. That's the hardest part. So no one else has that answer. Okay, so we actually have a couple people asking about Media Bistro. Do you know anything about that site for classes and online learning?
No, I don't. There are so many out there. I think Bree and I were talking, and I went down to look for it. I have a good friend, Christine, who's doing artwork using 3D printers. And like there's a website where you can send people your 3D design, and they'll print it out and sell it for you. It's artwork and jewelry, and it's like, there are all kinds of stuff. And these things are coming day after day after day. So no, I don't know anything about Media Bistro, but I'm going to check it out.
All right. And then another question about remote networking. Do you have any tips for trying to network and kind of grow your contacts in a remote way?
Yeah, there are a couple things I do. Number one, when someone sends me a LinkedIn connection request, my first response is to, as long as they look like they're a real person, is to accept it. And then I send them a message back saying, I accepted your LinkedIn connection request. How'd you find me? And by the way, about 80% of the time, people respond. And I'm trying to just get a dialogue going. The other piece here is get on LinkedIn and search for people who look, taste, and smell like you. By the way, you can Google on Career Pivot, look for look, taste, and smell like you. I did a blog post on how you find people who are like you, who are doing the job that you want to do. So a classic example, I have a client who's remaking herself into a Ruby on Rails programmer. I had her, and she's in her late 50s, and I had her Google Ruby on Rails in her area. Now, 95% of the folks who came up were all young guys. So I had her go through looking for pictures where people were older. And what I had her do was, well, who hired these people? By the way, just about every one of them was working at a government agency or a government contractor. Fair hiring. So then she has someone she can go reach out to. So find people who look, taste, and smell like you.
All right, perfect. And then I think we probably have time for one more question before we wrap it up.
Okay.
Let's see. Oh, how about, do you have any suggestions for cutting edge technologies for working in a flexible virtual environment?
Again, I would, the Audacities of the world, I mean, they've got General Assembly. Those have really leading edge stuff. The problem with the real leading edge stuff is the stuff changes so fast. Rather interesting, I was asked to come in to talk to a coding boot camp at my local community college. And they were struggling as to what to get these folks trained in today that would make them employable tomorrow. Because stuff changes so fast. What's hot skill today will not be a hot skill tomorrow. It's similar when my client was looking, and she started going down the Ruby on Rails path long before she came to me, and Ruby on Rails was a lot hotter 2 years ago than it is today. So it's a matter of, okay, when do you jump on, and can you time it right? And more importantly, I said, I've got a lot of clients in their 50s and 60s. Will someone hire them? I said, my Stan is 67. And by the way, 2 Mondays ago, he got a call for an interview. He interviewed on Wednesday, and he started as a contractor on Thursday, and he's about to start as a full-time employee. Poof. We had no idea it was going to happen. And it took a year. So,
all right.
Pick the technology carefully.
Absolutely. Okay. Well, thank you very much, Marc.
Okay.
And thank you, everybody. I know there are some questions we didn't get a chance to answer, but just in the interest of time, we should probably wrap it up. So thank you all for participating in all that good stuff.
So the key piece here is industry conferences, podcast, online training. If you're either going to end up in a career disaster area, or you're going to end up on the top of the heap. It's all about your own attitude, being ready to make that leap, and being adventurous. So with that, oops, let me do one thing here. So we're going to skip questions. By the way, my book, which just came out in April, Repurpose Your Career, a practical guide for the second half of life. I'm working on the audio version right now. And you can always find me you can reach me at Marc, it's M-A-R-C, my mama knew how to spell. You can You can, I'm on Twitter, Facebook. My Facebook page is lonely, like it. And if you reach out to me on LinkedIn, please just, when you send a connection request, just simply said you heard me on the FlexJobs webinar. And again, my podcast and my website. So with that, I think we're done.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Marc, so much on behalf of FlexJobs. We really appreciate all of the awesome advice and information and tips that you give us every time you do a webinar with us. So thank you very much for your time and your knowledge. And thank you, everybody, today for joining us. Thanks, everyone who asked questions or participated in polls or just sat quietly and learned. We like all of that. For more information about FlexJobs and to find info on our upcoming webinars, you can go to flexjobs.com/blog. And there's information about our webinars under the job resources area. You'll see the webinars section and all sorts of good stuff coming up. And thank you all very much. Any last thoughts, Marc?
Well, the key piece here is, as I said, your employer, no one's going to take care of anyone. No one's going to take care of you anymore. And this has never been easier to get out there and learn. It's never been cheaper and never been easier. So go do it.
Awesome. Good note to end on there. Thank you all so much and have a great rest of the day.